both appealing for peace or were you praying for peace?
And the same applies to the Kaliningrad.
Yeah, that's a good question. So what do you have to say about that, guys? Good morning, afternoon, evening, wherever you are, and welcome to the latest edition of Views on the News. We have our usual motley crew, panel of wise and witty people from around the world to join us and give their opinions. So, first of all, we have my co-host, Tersia from South Africa. Welcome, Tersia. Thank you for coming. Jon,
thank you, John.
From Oregon. Welcome, Jon. Thank you. Nice to see you back after your tours. And Tom, the Tominator from Philadelphia. Thank you for coming, Tom. David from New York. There you go. We've got a lot of Americans in the show today. And unfortunately, there's not much news on America this week. There you go. So, taking a look, first of all, at item number 1, which is about a sculpture, which is believed to be the first of its kind in the world. And it's going to be erected in the Smethwick area of the West Midlands here in England. And it's been put up, or it is being put up, by a charity called the Legacy West Midlands, who have received a grant of £68,488. And it's 5 meters, 16 feet tall, weighs about a ton, and listen to this, it's believed to be the first sculpture of a woman wearing a hijab. Let me show you. It looks like this. It's a load of rusty metal. And that is a tweet. Are we allowed to call them tweets? Now it's X. By Mariam Namazi, who was one of the presenters at the event I staged last week. And she says, in case you don't know, she is an anti-misogynist feminist campaigner. She says that Luke Perry, who is the sculptor, she's asking him whether he is going to make sculptures celebrating FGM, chastity belt, foot binding, breast ironing, and sati. I'm not sure what that is as well, because she says it must be nice for a man to celebrate male control of women's bodies. And what do you think of that?
Firstly, can I say that I don't know if it's still practiced, though it's entirely possible. As far as I know, sati is the practice in Hinduism where if a husband dies, the wife has to die as well. I might be mistaken.
Yeah.
I think that's what it is. And if it were to commemorate, if the statue was to commemorate the death of Iranian activists and activists, men and women, of course, then why is she not just sort of flinging the hijab off?
Yes, exactly.
Just a question. I mean, the other thing about a tweet, I've heard it being referred to as by David Pacman as so it used to be Twitter and you make a tweet. Now it's X and it's referred to as an excrement.
Yes.
Not my joke, David Pacman.
Yeah. Sounds appropriate to me. Well, you're right, because elsewhere in the world, they're celebrating burning the hijab. Why are we sticking a sculpture up to celebrate it? Mm-hmm. Women are dying. Women are dying for showing their hair in Iran.
Hey, John.
Was he commissioned?
Can you click the link I just put in the chat and throw it up on the screen? This is the Alame page that has a bunch of other works of his. You might find some of them interesting.
Give me a minute.
Take your time.
I can do it. But can we hear some other views while I get this organized?
Well, my question is, was he commissioned to do this art piece, or was it spontaneous?
There was £68,000 of grant, £68,500 of grant available for it. So I assume that he was commissioned.
Oh, okay. So, because I'm sure he wouldn't do this just spontaneously. So, while I know Miriam, and I really respect her advocacy work, my question is, when you're talking about somebody's artistic expression, you could look at the Sistine Chapel, or you can see other expression of religious art or religious, anything related to religion, and say, almost you can make the same claim in that, well, we know that these organized religions are really bad, so why are we celebrating the art of these types of things? So, I understand, and I'm I remember seeing a meme that said, yes, I wear this out of choice, but then of course it's a false choice. It's not almost a Hobson's choice. If I don't wear it, I will be rejected. I could be violently dealt with by my community or my husband. So it's not really a choice. So I don't know. I need to know more information on this.
Well,
So it looks like if you can scroll back up, John. I mean, we're getting some Luke Perry mixed in here for the actor, but this one here, in the top left, if you could make that big for me, John. That's a statue of a hero.
Yeah.
And the next one next to that, if you go back to the small view and then click on the one right next to that, at least that's how it is on my screen. Yeah, it's that one right there, the second one.
The NHS one.
Yes. That's another one he did. So generally speaking, it appears to me this guy likes to make sculptures of heroes.
Big ones, yes.
Yeah. How does somebody who makes sculptures of heroes make a sculpture of a woman in a hijab unless it was somebody fighting against the oppression? How can you even do that? Shame on you, Luke. That's my opinion.
I want to just chime in with David here and say, there's such a thing as subversion. I don't know enough about what he was told to do, and maybe it's the funders and the commissioners of the artwork that need to be investigated a little bit more.
Yeah.
And
Well, and I've got some more on that, because this is the West Midlands, which is an area where a lot of Muslim immigrants have congregated. And in last week's news and in the Views on the News show, I reported on a imam who has done a YouTube on how to correctly stone a woman to death. And people look at this video and they think, horrible things going on in Iran or Afghanistan. It's Birmingham. And this imam is the head of education at a masjid, a Muslim school, and that person and organization have recently been granted £2.2 million of my tax, our taxpayers' money. That's what's going on.
That's a complete shame. I mean, the idea of using any money, but certainly tax money, to support this level of misogyny, just shows how embedded the idea of religious belief being primary and always good, even though we know the facts. that require us to look at it more empirically and unbiasedly to see the violence, the systemic and systematic violence that we see across all faith practices.
Absolutely.
What do you know about the organization that funded the project?
I don't, I'm afraid. I can't do. I haven't researched that direction. No. But I can tell you that another organization known as the Policy Exchange, they've been doing some research, and they have revealed that Islamists have been permitted to dominate debate about religious clothing in the UK and abroad, and nobody is speaking against their views. And so there's a sort of a vacuum of opposition here, which has led to women and girls effectively having the hijab imposed upon them by their community activists or their school, despite the fact that much of the Islamic world, women are burning their hijabs as an oppressive garment. So the situation here is that it's become normalized for girls from about the age of 8 to have to cover their hair in certain parts of the country.
If I can just chime in here, I think it's perhaps one of the reasons that these things are happening is because we've come accustomed to sort of a political correctness where politics and racism and religion has been intertwined to such an extent that now and black and white thinking without nuance has become so prevalent in our societies worldwide that if you say Islamic doctrine and Sharia law is not it's not a humanist value, it's repressive, it's misogynistic, then you run the risk of being labeled Islamophobic. It's a little bit like in South Africa where if as a white person you speak out against corruption, you're called a racist, and you called because the National Party was the oppressor, and if you white, then you must have been a supporter of the National Party in the 1980s and 70s, and it's a symptom of a lack of being able to think nuanced, and it's really harmful. And what's happening in the States as we speak is probably another example of that, and how religion and politics are deliberately intertwined by the fundamentalists.
Yes. They're wrapping up social attitudes with their religion. But Islam has always done that. It's both a religion and a government in one.
I think what separates the fundamentalist sects from all the other sects in most religions is that the fundamentalist sects, that's a really hard word to say clearly.
I say on this channel, it's fine, and that's also fundamental.
I agree, but I want to get my actual point across too. So the fundamentalist religious sects in general think it's okay for them to impose their religion on society in general. And that's a problem because it's not. And they'll hide behind things like the US's separation of church and state by trying to use it like a one-way rule. No, you can't tell us not to say what we're saying. Oh, but we can tell you what to say. Like, and it's a bad situation. And honestly, I don't see a clear and easy way out of it.
Yeah. Well, do you think that we liberal Democrats, are too tolerant?
I don't think so, because anytime you limit what somebody can do, you're ultimately limiting what you can do too.
Right.
So, like, we can have a law in the U.S. that says we can't pass laws favoring or supporting or denying any religion. And that, in a political ideology, is a great law to have. The problem is we can't make a law that says you have to wear a hijab, but we also can't make one that says you can't.
Well, they've done that in France.
So under our Constitution, we cannot do that.
Well, they've done that in France and in the French-speaking parts of Canada, Quebec. They have done that.
I want to hear what David and John think about this idea of being too tolerant. Before I give my view, I'm curious about what
you know. I think sometimes, especially in the U.S., it's you know, tolerance can be a very you don't want to be Neville Chamberlain tolerant.
Yeah.
Because because appeasement doesn't work with more radical religious forces. People who are have a belief system that doesn't seek to encroach on your secular worldview and your life, you can live within a secular democracy forever. The problem is where, especially in the United States, where you do have the politicization of religion interfering with the secular world. There are pharmacists who can say, I won't fill this prescription because of my religious belief.
Yeah.
There are people who won't make a cake for LGBTQ people, friends because of their religious beliefs, right? And so, you know, you have in schools now more censorship than ever, and it's based on religious faith, you know, on what sexuality is, on what history is, and so you can't appease these people. The trick is you live in a free society, so I am equally able to speak out, write about, and use my political resources and my economic resources to fight against people who I see are a threat to my secular rights. And others to do.
Yeah, I would just like to say that how easily we forget what happened with Harris and Hitchens 20 years ago when the Four Horsemen came out, and they especially were concerned about the physical violence from radical Islam, and they were immediately labeled as Islamophobic, and taken to the woodshed, often by sociology departments, kind of the radical left. And so, you know, the fact that we can't differentiate between holding up Muslims, people's rights to do whatever they want, versus attacking Islam, the fact that the Islamic fundamentalists want to converge those two so that any criticisms of their religion is seen as an attack on the individuals. And so that's a battle that's been going on, you know, for a long time, but especially since Harris and Hitchens made an issue of it early on.
So I've got a couple of
sorry, John,
come in.
I just want to summarize, what I think everybody's view might agree with what I want to say. I don't think we should be less tolerant. I think we should be more tolerant, but with the caveat that we should also definitely be more activist and less apathetic. And we should be more tolerant in how we express ourselves, but we should express ourselves more as non-religious people, because and as secular humanists, not only as non-religious people, we should maintain our tolerance, because but we should distinguish between being tolerant and being apathetic or being fatalistic. And I think that's the fine line that we need to tread, to be more outspoken, but to communicate what we want to say in such a way that we don't come across as intolerant. Of course, you'll never have everybody on your side, but I think we need to distinguish between tolerance and not and being activistic and being proactive, because as David rightly said, you sometimes one has to fight fire with fire, but that doesn't mean one has to be intolerant. Paradoxically.
Yeah.
Well,
So tolerant but not silent.
I think somebody once said very well that if your tolerance is interpreted as permission, then you've got to speak up.
Yeah.
That's it.
Everybody, well, actually, mostly David and John were using the terms tolerant and appeasement almost interchangeably. And I think that's the problem. We need to be totally tolerant, but we don't need to put up with it. We don't need to appease them. We don't. Yeah. And I think that's exactly what Tersia was saying too.
Mm-hmm.
Yes.
I like David's Neville Chamberlain level of tolerance.
I did like that.
For what?
Yeah. So I do have a couple of slightly better items of news while we're on the subject of the Islamic religion, because thanks to digital technology, there's a surging phenomenon of ex-Muslims in India.
Mm-hmm.
So there's a good piece of news. And in Iran, women stirred up by, the death of Mahsa Amini in police custody a year ago and a few days, are fighting for their rights. There's now video going around the internet of them taking off their hijabs, putting them on a bonfire and dancing around. So it's unusual in Iran, which has been very suppressed for, 50 years. So, no, 40 years, less than 50. So there's those two items of good news. But here's a little item about Indonesia, where, let me see if I can bring this up to share for you. This is a bit from the Global Atheist News of Saturday, where this woman, this young girl, she's a TikToker, and see if I can get this going for you. It's going to be small because it's, let me see if I can, I'll start it going and then try and make it big, see what happens.
Video.
That's our new...
A TikToker has been sentenced by an Indonesian court to 2 years in jail after she posted a viral video where she said Islamic phrase before eating pork. Lina Lutfiawati, better known as Lina Mukherjee, said Bismillah, a holy Arabic phrase which means in the name of God and is said by Muslims before eating. She then proceeded to eat pork, which is strictly forbidden in Islam. Lina was found guilty of inciting hatred and breaking blasphemy laws in Indonesia, where the majority of the population are Muslim. The 33-year-old has been given a £13,155 fine on top of her 2-year sentence. Her sentencing has had mixed reaction on Indonesian social media, with some people agreeing and others arguing it's harsh compared to other crimes such as corruption.
So there you go. You've got a
film started in Kerman, Iran, and girls going to Kimia Danesh school sang to celebrate. The principal got fired and the producers of the song were arrested. See the following video.
Sorry, this is taken over. Sorry, I left it running. That's our new correspondent, Momus, if you haven't met him. He's handling our Islamic news. Could you hear that video that I played? It's about this girl in Indonesia who said Bismillah and then ate some pork. And she has been sentenced to 2 years in jail and given a hefty fine.
Well, I maybe there's somebody who will help me and we can make a video where we say Bismillah before we have water, because there are 3 jinns in water, 2 oxygens and 1 hydrogen. So Bismillah, and it's terrible to live under a dictatorship run by Sharia laws.
There you go.
Mm-hmm.
So, whether you like pork or not, you shouldn't be put in jail for saying a word before you eat it, should you?
Bacon is my spirit animal.
Yes. So, there's another not so good news, I'm afraid, from Iran, where in Kerman, school has started. The term began, and girls, they have to be younger because, of course, they don't like older girls being educated. They started going to their Kimia Danesh school, and they were so joyous going back to school that they sang to celebrate. They had a DJ and dancing was seen. Do you know what happened? The school principal was fired and the producers of the song were arrested.
So no joy. So Allah is not a very joyful deity, and his prophet Muhammad is a very unjoyous person as well.
Right, so, yeah.
Except if you're a man, then you can dance ritually.
Oh yes, of course. I forgot about that.
Right? It's not about there's no dancing. It's that women can't dance.
Yeah.
And oddly enough, if you really look at the way the Islamic Church, especially the fundamentalist Islamic Church, treats women, and the way U.S. evangelical and fundamentalist purity culture treats women, except for covering the hair, it is literally identical.
Mm-hmm.
Well, in some fundamentalist congregations, the women even have to cover their hair. They just use a hat. And I mean, even in, let's not forget that in very conservative Roman Catholic communities, a woman also has to cover her hair when she goes into the church, just in case.
Hasidic Jewish communities, it's the same thing.
Yes. It's all about covering the hair up. How weird is that?
So why do you think the creator of the universe cares so much about what's on top of your head?
Yeah, why did he give us hair? It's obviously
because he made men completely incapable of controlling our sexual urges, and therefore women have to protect themselves from the evil men running around who just want to have sex with them all the time. After all, that's what they're good for, right? Like, that's how this logic works.
Gentlemen, as the only woman on the panel, I think I have the right to say that you are probably correct, because we on the weekend when we told our guests, our hosts at least, how we met, that's my husband and I, he said the first thing he noticed about me, I kid you not, was that I had a lovely head of curly hair. Yeah. So he saw me from behind and he liked my hair, and that is what so maybe they have a point, you know. Well, men are just weaker than women, and they can't control themselves, and one lock is enough to set them off, you know.
I've liked a lot of women from behind, but then they've turned round.
Did any of them have a beard? I had that happen once. I mean, let's face it, the first thing that's going to attract you to a person you meet in person are their looks, because it's all you have access to in that moment.
Yeah.
But that's not really the point I was making. The point I was making is that we can't control ourselves, so you have to protect yourselves from us, is basically the teaching.
Yes.
And that will never be acknowledged. I mean, never will it be said in any of these religions that the men are in fact weaker than women. I mean, that would be blasphemy in itself. Though that's the implication that men can't control themselves. Therefore, women have to cover up because men can't control themselves.
Well, I urge you to watch the presentation of Mariam Namazi, which happened last week, and I've almost finished editing it when it goes up, because there's a bit there where there's some imam or other leader of the Muslim faith who is telling us that there's animals, there's cows, and there's sheep, and there's pigs, and there are no pigs, there's dogs, there's animals, and then there's women, they're the other animals. It's really outrageous. I mean, it's ludicrous. But
it's like living in the 23rd century and having the belief system of the 12th century.
Yeah,
which means not realizing that humans are all animals. All
Right,
humans are animals,
exactly.
not only women.
Yeah. Well, there you go. Watch it when it comes out. Anyway, I'm glad somebody mentioned the Roman Catholic Church and fundamentalist attitudes, because in Italy, there's new measures that are being made law targeting LGBT families who wish to have children by surrogacy. Because, same-sex parents, they want to be, same-sex couples want to be parents. And in most of Europe, unfortunately, it's illegal to have children by a surrogate mother. And so there's a couple who, we're calling them Claudio and David. They have a baby on the way through a woman in another country. She's carrying it for them. So they have to travel to countries where it is legal to have children by a surrogate birthing mother if you're gay, and they have to fetch them back home. So they go to the US or Canada and then bring them back. But the Italian Senate is just bringing out this bill that would make surrogacy a universal crime. In other words, it would apply to the whole world. So serious that it would be prosecutable even if committed abroad, like human trafficking or pedophilia is. There you go. So this couple.
So is it legal to have a sperm donor? So two gay women can.
I guess so. There's no surrogacy involved in that, is there? But when this bill becomes law, Claudio and David could face a fine of £872,000 and up to 2 years in jail for having a child. Their child won't have parents. They'll be in jail.
This reminds me in the U.S. where it was quite illegal for people of different quote unquote races to marry, and how that was considered illegal. I know in the UK and in a lot of other countries, if you were gay, look at what happened to Alan Turing.
Yeah.
These things are illegal. How we live in a free society where we let our government decide what we do with our bodies and who we choose to love and create family is not democratic, and it is not secular, and it is not based on justice. It is based on some form of religiosity rather than the power of secularism.
Yeah. Well, it's being brought in by Giorgia Meloni. She is the first female prime minister of Italy, and her party, Brothers of Italy, is a direct political descendant of Mussolini's fascist party.
Yay.
She describes herself as a Christian mother and a firm believer that a child should be raised by a mother and father. Mm-hmm. And of course, the Catholic Church has always been strong in Italy. That's why it's the Roman Catholic Church. And so even you asked me about artificial insemination or adoption, they're not options for LGBT couples in Italy. So even, two lesbians cannot use artificial insemination or even adoption.
I'm curious how many international treaties she's violating with that bill.
Well, she's
because with that bill, she's saying that someone can come to the U.S., legally adopt a child in the U.S., which would strip it of its U.S. citizenship and its U.S. birthrights, take it back to Italy, where it will not have citizenship or birthrights. That's got to violate a treaty.
Well, she's saying that it's like human trafficking. That's what she's saying, and that is universally illegal. But
that would be a very interesting proof case to make. I just want to say that one should never make the mistake of thinking that that women are more reasonable than men, and that just because a person is a woman, that she makes a better leader or that she can't be fascist.
I would say in most cultures where women have been oppressed historically, if they're backed by a radical position, they're much more likely to be more radical than a man would in the same position, because they have to maintain the progress they've made.
Yep.
They have to wear the trousers. Yeah. That's pants, by the way. I'm doing a translation. I said they had to wear the trousers, and I translated to the American pants. Yeah.
Pants.
So, yeah. So
I think David, did you want to say something?
No, I just put a note up in the chat.
Yeah. You have to go. Well,
yeah, I have to go. I'm at work today, and sadly I have to work sometime.
I know.
It's lovely to see you, David.
It's wonderful.
Nice seeing you again, Dave.
Bye-bye.
Have a good day.
Bye.
See you again. Take care. Well, that was nice. So I just want to finish with one little item here, which is about Australia, where they don't have the problems that some of the other parts of the world do, but they think they do. They get their knickers in a twist over items which we would regard as not very serious. But I don't know how you're going to consider this one, because they've got a defense force. That's the name for their military. And historically, you know, they've only been concerned with defending themselves. They haven't been going out on any gallivanting exploits like the US or the UK does.
Except against the Aboriginals and against the rabbits, and what are those? There's a bird species as well that they've.
But that's internal. That's like a law against
emu wars. They had 2 emu wars. Okay, so let's just mention that.
Yes. So anyway, what's happened there is the spokesperson of the opposition of the Australian government, who's responsible for speaking on the matters of defence, military, in other words, Luke Howarth. He's noticed that it's getting difficult to recruit soldiers, sailors, airmen, because Australia has become increasingly irreligious. And, you know, if you're in the military, you have to swear by Almighty God that you're going to defend your country in the name of blah, blah, blah. And a lot of people are balking at that, and they're having trouble getting recruits. So what he's done, this is interesting, is he's suggested they should tap into recent immigrants to Australia, because in his experience, and he's attended a lot of naturalization events where they've, you know, sworn to the flag, he's noticed that most of them have a much stronger faith in God. Whereas, according to the census, Australia is only about 50% thereabouts God believing. The immigrants are 90%. So we should get them in the army and the Air Force.
Well, I can attest that every second South African that emigrates, if not 2/3, goes to Australia, and all of them are religious. A number of my schoolmates who matriculated French school with me, if I just think off the top of my head, 10 to 12 of my peers who of a class of 60 are in Australia, and they are extremely fundamentalist religious. So maybe it's not a bad bet from his point of view.
You see, you've got to be right wing to be in the army, haven't you?
Absolutely.
There's actually an Amazon documentary. It's like 6 parts that covers a Christian fundamentalist community in, I don't remember if it's Australia or the little island next to them whose name I'm forgetting right now. Tasmania. Yeah. But it's in one of those 2 locations where this sect lives. And they run a gigantic farm and sell their products. And so there's probably a little more going on with fundamentalism in Australia than the rest of the world is aware of. I mean, just and evangelicalism too. Look at Hillsong. I mean,
exactly. So immigrants, we're not against you. Just don't bring your religion.
Or join the military.
Guys, thank you very much. You've been wonderful, as I knew you would. Thank you for coming. Hope to see you again. Before we go, I'm going to stop the show now, but afterwards I want to have a little chat with you about which day of the week suits you best. Okay? So here we go with say goodbye.
Was the Pope appealing for peace, or was he praying for peace?
And the same applies to the carry-on drag.
Yeah, that's a good question. So what do you have to say about that?